We'll lay him.
Detective Sandell, after that interview was the defendant formally arrested and charged with the murders of her 2 children?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ultimately, later that afternoon, at some point was she transported to jail?
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to send you out for about a 15-minute comfort break. As I send you out, I'll remind you again, we're in the course of trial, not to discuss the cases on yourselves, not to discuss it with anyone else, not to allow anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence, not to speak at all with attorneys, witnesses, defendant about any subject to your deliberations are finished, not to even listen to any reports, application of any source, not to do any research, gather information, communicate about the case or the people or places involved to any means, including electronic devices. This will be about a 15-minute break.
All rise. All rise. If you're getting questions.
Everyone can be seated. You may cross the line.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Detective Sandell, you were, in this case, and I believe you testified earlier that you were assigned to be the lead detective. That's a reference to you being in charge of the operation and in charge of the investigation. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
In such capacity, it would be also accurate to say that you had access to developments as they came up in situations where the other officers that were part of the investigation at your direction would tell you what was going on?
Yes, sir.
That would include the people that were at the Schenecker residence or people that did any other work investigating aspects of this case in the field. Would that be correct?
Yes.
That would also involve the other officers that had contact with Ms. Schenecker at 411 North Franklin Street. You would have access to that as well?
Yes.
And I think you said earlier, and I want to make sure that you did see Ms. Schenecker at the Schenecker residence that day yourself, January 28th, 2011, correct?
Just very briefly.
Right,
Right
remember
before
you said
she
that.
was transported. Yes, sir.
You didn't have any conversation with her?
I don't believe so, other than maybe telling her that we were going to go down to do an interview. But other than that, or just that would have been just small talk, nothing, no investigative, no questions or anything.
Are you even sure you had that conversation with her, or was that possibly a comment to the person that was going to transport her? Hey, we're going to go interview, take her downtown.
It could have been with the door open, but I'm fairly sure she was pretty close by when I made that statement.
She certainly could have heard you.
Sure, sure.
I do get the impression, though, from your testimony that you didn't have any substantive conversation about the circumstances at all?
No.
You didn't have any specific conversation where you asked her to make a statement while you were still at the residence?
No, sir.
It's my understanding from listening to other testimony, as well as some awareness of the case at this point, that she was there from the first arriving officer, she was there with police presence from somewhere around 7:30 in the morning all the way maybe 2 hours or so. Were you aware of that as well?
It's my understanding that they responded out it was closer to 8 o'clock, and I think by the time I got out there it was closer to 10, so she would have been out there almost 2 hours by the time I got there.
And my question to you is, did you have any awareness from talking to the people that worked under you in this investigation, did you have any awareness of what she was doing or saying during that time?
Not anything specific, no. Nothing that I recall specific, no.
Specifically, the first responders were Officers Noble and Kopelos.
Yes.
And I take it that you didn't have any conversation with them in which they informed you about anything related to their observations of Ms. Schenecker, correct?
Basically what they observed when they first got there, I mean, they gave me just a little rundown on what they had seen or heard, but it wasn't anything real specific, nothing in writing. It was just small talk before they transported.
So, and I think, and I'm not sure if I have his rank correctly, but Sergeant Pryor, was he a sergeant at that point?
He was a sergeant at that time. He's a lieutenant now.
And Sergeant Pryor arrived pretty early as well, and you didn't have any conversations with him regarding his observations of Ms. Schenecker either, right?
Just real, like I said, just real brief stuff before she got transported, maybe just a few items, but nothing specific, and like I said, nothing real in-depth investigative.
And so the impression that I'm getting from your testimony is that you really had very little, if any, idea about Ms. Schenecker's behavior during those 2 hours, is that correct?
No, I knew, like I said, I knew some real basic stuff. I mean, they kind of explained to me her reaction and how she had acted when they first got there. When we get called, it isn't 5 minutes before I get there. I usually patrol's on scene somewhere for an hour, hour and a half before I even get a phone call. So between that phone call, because it's got there's procedures that are applied, there's people that are called, notifications, and then by the time I get notified, they may have been at a scene for an hour or more, and then it's usually within an hour of when I'm notified is when I arrive. So that would put the 2 hours, and then when I arrived on scene, like I said, just basic information. I knew that there were two deceased children. I knew that a gun was recovered. I knew that that she was still at the scene, and like I said, just small talk, just real basic information before we did the interview.
But you didn't know about anything that she may have said during those 2 hours, correct?
Nothing specific that I recall, but I mean, it could have been something as easy or simple as she started making some admissions spontaneously, but I don't recall anything specific, and I didn't document it in my report. So.
Well, that's going to be the next question I was going to ask
Correct.
you. If you did have such information, you would have documented it correctly?
Correct.
And you don't have any such documentation?
So that's why I'm telling you that I didn't have real specific information, just some basic stuff, and then she was transported.
And that would have been your only source to talk to those officers that were with her for those 2 hours? That would have been your only source to gain information about what she was doing during those 2 hours, which we would say was the very first 2 hours of this case, correct?
Correct.
And all of this is a prelude to your interview of her that's going to take place later in the morning of January 28, 2011.
That's correct.
At some point in time, though, without any other information about what she had been saying or doing, or any of her behaviors, you instructed that she go down to 411 North Franklin Street, which is the headquarters
Yes.
of your department, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the purpose of that was to conduct an interview of her.
That's correct.
Now, let me ask you this. At what point in time were you aware that the search of the residence at the Scheneckers was starting to take place?
Are you talking about the search prior to my arrival where they searched for victims?
Search, no, not that, just the search of the residence for things that may have been there, walking through, picking up things, collecting evidence.
I knew that it was assigned to Detective Kurlangitis to do the search warrant, so the probable cause and the information was given to him, partly by me, partly by Prebich, and also some of the information was given to him by Officer Copulus, who was the on-scene officer that would have more of the information than I would have. He is who did the search warrant, and once the search warrant is signed, Detective Kurlangaittis responded out to the scene, and that's when items were starting to be, that's when it was starting to be processed.
That's not really the nature of my question. What I'm trying to get at from you is you're getting ready to start an interview with Ms. Schenecker, correct?
Correct.
My question for you is, was that process already started by the time you started your interview?
Yes, it was already, that assignment was already given to Detective Kurlangaittis, and he was already well on his way with Officer Copulus developing the information and applying the information in the search warrant. Yes, sir.
Okay, and then going back to my previous thought, since you're the lead detective, you would have had access to information that was developed as it developed from the people that were at the house doing those tasks, correct?
But not exact and not immediate. It's not like somebody finds something and they immediately call or text me while I'm in an interview. It doesn't work like that. You get pieces of information as you're going. I had basic information before I did the interview, and as we did the interview, more information arose as we did the interview, and most of it coming from the defendant.
Most of the information you got about Julie Schenecker came from Julie Schenecker.
Absolutely.
That's what you're saying.
Most of it, yes.
And the other information that was filtering in from the people that were working under your leadership as part of the investigation, well, that was coming in slowly and,
yes,
and not as much while you were interviewing her, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, the purpose of taking a statement, you're trying to find out what happened, right?
Exactly.
You didn't have any other suspects, certainly, based on the circumstances that you were aware of at the time you started the interview, correct?
That's correct.
So you're trying to find out what happened, and no better person to talk to than the person that you think actually was responsible for this, correct?
That's correct.
Yet at the same time, a person of your experience in law enforcement understands the necessity to have a statement that has integrity, one that's knowingly and voluntarily and intelligently given, correct?
That's correct.
Thus the reason for the Tampa Police Department 310 form that's a consent to be interviewed form?
Yes, sir.
In fact, when you take steps to conduct an interview like you and Detective Previch did in this situation, you're going to make sure to cover the information in that 310 form to make sure that the other person that you're talking to understands all those concepts, correct?
Yes, sir.
In fact, that's why you take the time to read it, or in this case, I think maybe Detective Previch did, but certainly in your presence.
Yes, sir.
Read it line by line and try to ascertain whether the person you're speaking to understands every one of those concepts, correct?
Yes, sir.
So it's very, very important. You would agree?
Yes.
Now, prior to this, though, before we start talking about this interview, a couple questions about the circumstances or the surroundings of the interview. The initial resting place, as it were, for Ms. Schenecker when she got to 411 North Franklin Street was a holding cell on the 8th floor, correct?
Yes.
Was that your direction that caused her to end up there, or that's what typically happens when somebody gets brought in initially?
No, it typically happens when somebody comes in. They go in the holding cell temporarily, and until we get the information ready and the tape ready, and that's usually when they're offered something to drink or a bathroom break or a snack or something. But yeah, that's where everybody goes to.
So that wasn't at your direction,
no,
so to speak. That was just procedure. That's the way you usually do it.
Correct.
Okay. And was it at your direction Detective McCaughey was asked to stand by?
Yes, it was, because Officer Copulus needed to give information to Detective Kurlangaittis to assist with the information on the search warrant. And also I knew that crime scene technicians a female was going to come up and change her clothes out and do some forensic stuff, and I wouldn't sit in on that. It would have to be a female sitting in with a female, so that's why she was asked to do that.
So that part of it was at your direction for the reasons you just stated?
Either myself or Detective Previch, we both were on the same page as far as we knew that needed to be done, and it had to be done by a female. So yes, she was requested to come down, but I don't remember specifically if I asked or if Previch asked. I don't know.
Not of great importance. The point is that part of it was at the direction of someone.
Yes.
And I think you mentioned that a crime scene technician was going to show up. That ended up being Fiorello Caveas, correct?
Yes.
If I'm pronouncing the name correctly.
Yes.
And Caveas's role was going to be to take photographs and kind of observe as well, correct?
Yes.
And I think you mentioned that there was going to be a change out of clothing because I guess you guys were interested in finding out if her clothing had evidentiary value.
Yes, it had looked obviously to have blood evidence on it, so it was taken as well, yes.
And again, from your position as the lead detective in this matter, you would have had access to any observations that were made by either Detective McCaughey or crime scene technician Coveas, correct?
Not immediately, because like I said, I would be compiling information, making a list of questions I know that I want to cover, making sure that the recorder's working, that, you know, making sure that I'm ready for the interview. So I would have that information before I do the interview, but I wouldn't go back and forth and ask questions. Usually something would be relayed to me before I go to the interview, but it may not. There may have been a few items that weren't told to me before the interview. But I know that I know from speaking with then Detective McCauley that she had made some statements in front of her presence. My response to that was just make sure you document it.
So you got the information about statements that were made by Ms. Schenecker.
That she was making spontaneous utterances, yes, sir.
Right. And you learned certainly about those, correct, prior to
Yes.
your interview? So you
Yes.
had that information going into the interview.
Yes, sir.
However, you didn't get any information from Coveas or McCaughey regarding their observations of Ms. Schenecker, correct?
Of observations of what, her behavior or?
Physically, her observations. For example, I'll make it easier this way. For example, you didn't know anything about her having a problem standing up before your interview, correct?
No.
And you didn't know, for example, that Coveas had to take the picture that she normally takes of a person standing up. She had to take that picture with Ms.
No.
And you didn't know whether or not she had dropped anything like water or dropped juice or whatever when she was in the holding cell observed by McCaughey and Coveas?
No.
You didn't know any of those things regarding, and those are the kind of things I'm talking about, are observations that they made. You did learn about the statements, the spontaneous statements.
Correct.
You didn't learn any other observations, correct?
Correct.
This interview room that you were in,
Yes, sir.
this is an interview room that had no actually audio or video taping capabilities. You brought your own recorder, correct?
That's correct.
Was that what you all were doing at that time?
At that time, we had no capability of doing any videotaping at all, except what I learned from this case that we did have down in sex crimes for forensic interviews. Other than that, we didn't have any of that capabilities. We do now, but we didn't then.
Now, if you had gone to sex crimes, and I'm not suggesting that you would have thought of that or would have come up, but if you had gone there, there would have been the capabilities at that time to do an audio and video tape of the interview, correct?
Like I said, I've been up there 7 years, and I think at that time I'd been up there since 2007. It was never brought up, and it was never brought to our attention from our supervisors that we could use that or that it was even available.
Isn't District 2 equipped, or wasn't at that time, January 28, 2011, District 2 also equipped with the capabilities to do an audio-video taping of an interview?
If it was, it wasn't the information. If it was available, it wasn't given to any of us because I had no idea.
Okay. In any event, you end up conducting the interview in the fashion that you did, and you did try to record it. You had
Yes.
an audio recorder.
Yes,
That
sir.
was one you supplied yourself, correct?
Well, it's issued, but it's one that I made sure was working, and yes, it was the one that was assigned to me, yes, sir.
Let me ask you this question. Are police cars, or back in January of 2011, weren't the police cars equipped with the ability to record as well if someone was being transported?
I think some were. I don't think all were. I think it was part of some grant that we had, but I don't know whether those arriving officers had it in their car or not. I don't know. But not all cars have it, no.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is that, and I don't know if this is always accurate, but you see there are recording instruments that you guys wear on your shoulders just in case of an emergency. You can communicate with other officers, is that correct?
Basic radio?
Yeah.
Yes.
And they can be used as a recording device as well, correct?
Not that I know of. I've never heard of that.
So you couldn't, the officers that were
Record somebody
there
off
at
of
the
a
scene,
radio?
the first
No.
responders, for example?
Just a moment. Please don't speak over each other. Question, answer. She's got to be able to take it down. Ask your question again, sir.
the first responders that showed up at the Schenecker's residence, they didn't have any capabilities whatsoever in 2011 to be able to record anything that she said or did at that time?
From their police radios? Nah, not that I know
From
of.
any?
Nothing. If they had a shoulder mic that they had that recorded, like, I think after you go over a certain speed, or if you activate your emergency equipment, say you're going to get into a vehicle pursuit, it gets activated. The lights, once the lights are activated and the vehicle is activated, everything turns on. I don't believe I was ever even trained with that, because, like I said, I've been up in homicide since '07. I know that I never had an in-car system myself that worked. I know that one of the cars I had one, but it never worked. So like I said, some of the cars have it, some of them don't. I don't know, the guys, the two officers who are out there, I don't know what they were equipped with.
So the impression that I'm getting, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you were not aware of any way that the 2 hours that Ms. Schenecker was at her residence, she could have been videotaped or audio recorded in some fashion, that it could have been preserved so that people coming along later, like now, 2014, could see for themselves how she was behaving or what she was saying or doing, correct?
We didn't have, she was, to my understanding, she was in her own home for probably 99% of the time you're talking about. We don't walk around with cameras on our shoulders and record people while they're waiting for us to show up. So the answer to your question is no. We don't have that. We don't have that capability.
All right, and then the police didn't bring anything over there to the scene once they were there to try to capture her behavior?
No.
Or what she was saying or doing?
Other than what they documented in their report by hand or by computer, that would have been the only way that I'm aware of.
And as we established earlier in your testimony, you weren't given any background information such as that in this particular investigation prior to the beginning of your interview with her on January 28th.
No, what I stated was I was given basic information. They had told me that, that she was unsteady on her feet at first when they first got there, things like that, but I didn't have anything specific other than just, a few statements of some of the spontaneous statements she said, and then, like I said, when they first got there, she was, kind of off her feet a little bit, and she had to be, she had to sit down for a while. But by the time we got her to 411 for the interview, she wasn't anywhere near like that when we started the interview.
And again, as we established earlier, you weren't aware that when Coveas and McCaughey were with her, she couldn't stand on her own. That's why they photographed her seated.
No.
You weren't
No.
aware of that?
No, sir.
And if you had been aware of that, would that have given you pause to consider possibly having her see a doctor, have medical treatment provided for her before doing your interview?
If I thought that she needed medical help and I thought she was in distress, absolutely, if I thought that.
And you certainly weren't aware of that information that could have come to you from Coveas or McCaughey.
And I don't even know that just because she can't stand up without help, or I don't know this, it would depend on the circumstance. I mean, I'd have to assess it myself, but if I don't know all that at that time, like I said, when she came into the interview, she sat down fine. I gave her coffee. Other than some of the shaking, there was nothing else to me that would indicate that she was unable to understand.
Detective Sandell, do you yourself have any training and experience and the ability to identify mental illness, be able to identify the characteristics of it?
Not anything specific. I mean, I know that we've had in-service training. I've been here 20 years, probably a couple of times for a couple hours at a time, but nothing so specific that we would be able to really do an accurate assessment on somebody.
Most
No.
of the training you had was revolving around Baker Acts, though, correct?
Most of it, yes.
So you wouldn't say that you have any specific training in the identification or observation of mental illness?
Absolutely not.
No formal training from college or any mental health components like a class or anything of that nature?
No, sir.
Coupled with that, in this particular case, you had no knowledge of Ms. Schenecker's mental health history
That's
when you
correct.
started that interview, correct?
That is correct.
You had no medical records that you were able to obtain or did obtain regarding her mental health history prior to
Correct.
that interview.
That's correct.
You didn't have any knowledge of any diagnoses that she had been given in the past regarding mental illness?
No, all I had was the information given to me by the first arriving officers and Sergeant Pryor that there was medication at the house and that she was obviously taking some medication and that there were the wine bottles and some beer bottles, but other than that, that's all I had.
You didn't consult with any doctors that may have been reflected in the pill bottles that were found at the residence, right?
No, sir.
For example, there's a doctor that was mentioned on several of the pill bottles, Dr. Obregon. You didn't call Dr. Obregon to find out about his patient, did you?
No, and he would probably not talk to me because of HIPAA, so I wouldn't bother with the phone call.
Yeah, no, I'm basically just trying to find out what, from your perspective, you didn't have this information, and whether you may have liked to get it or not, that may be another story, but you didn't have that information. You didn't talk to any of her doctors.
No.
You didn't consult with any doctors at all, and now I'm expanding this question to the extent that earlier I said you consult with her doctors, but given the information that you were able to get from the house as it developed regarding prescriptions and regarding the medication that was found there, did you consult with any doctor, perhaps one that's just a friend of the department that you work for, to find out about patients that take those kinds of medications?
We don't really have anybody available like that that we can consult with, so no, there wasn't anybody called about that, no.
And going into the interview, prior to any information that you may have gotten from Ms. Schenecker herself, you had no awareness of the medication that she was taking or supposed to be taking at that time, correct?
That's correct.
And you had no awareness of the effect that those medications would have had on her should she be taking them, or conversely, if she had not been taking them?
That's correct.
In fact, you had no information regarding her mental health history whatsoever going to that interview, correct?
That's correct. The only thing would have changed that if she was in physical duress. Other than that, I mean, like in the interviews, she's answering the questions and she understood them, so I wouldn't have called, no.
If that same interview that you conducted on January 28th of 2011 had taken place today, or maybe tomorrow, a new case that you got, it would be audio taped and videotaped, correct?
Yes.
Is that now policy at the Tampa Police Department?
Yes, it is a policy when we have who we think is a suspect or a defendant, yes.
At the time, maybe lack of capabilities or whatever, it wasn't the policy and you didn't have the chance to do that, correct?
Well, that's the problem is if it was available to us, it wasn't made available to us by supervision back then. I mean, I knew that they did forensic interviews, but it was never presented to us by our command staff that we could use it for this. But now it is policy now, yes.
Now, I want to ask you to recall some of the specific things that were said in the interview, and the reason is I just, for example, early in the interview, Ms. Schenecker said, essentially, she never told you she wanted to talk to a lawyer, but she did say, as it was played just a little while ago in the tape, should I bring a lawyer? In other words, she's asking if she should get one. And so I ask you this, why was there no response to that question? I know that Detective Previch just kept on going and said, I want to get to the end of this, but at no point in time was there any acknowledgement by you or Detective Previch of that statement by Ms. Schenecker?
Probably because he was at the tail end of the Miranda warnings, and he told her we'll get back to that, and we both addressed that after that. And if at that point she needed a lawyer or wanted a lawyer, it would have been stopped.
So your acknowledgement of that consisted of saying, and I believe it's supported by the tape, and certainly, people can listen to it, but your acknowledgement regarding that particular point was simply, see, we answered the question by letting us finish the instruction. Is that correct?
Well, she got the Miranda warnings, so she knew what her rights were, and she understood them. So at that point, if she wanted counsel, it was available for her.
So despite that question that she asked, should I bring a lawyer, the interview went on?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
At some point in time, Ms. Schenecker says that she has to pay attention to the squeaks in the chairs. Aside from not knowing exactly what that meant, there was no discussion of that, correct, by you or Detective Previch?
You kind of had to be there in the interview room. The chairs are from SunTrust Bank about 20 years ago. So the chairs, if you move at all or if you turn the chair at all, they're very loud. They're very comfortable chairs, but they go back and forth. They make squeaking noises. So
your testimony is that that squeaking noise would be on the video? You could hear it from the video?
I couldn't hear it from the video, but I'm sure that that's what she was referring to.
And that certainty that that's what she was referring to, that's what allowed the interview to go on even after that statement?
Yes.
Not to suggest that any of the responses was accurate or inaccurate, but the tape that we just listened to, at some point in time when Detective Previch is reading from the 310 form asking whether there was any coercion, in other words, was Ms. Schenecker being coerced into making a statement or not, initially she says no, then she says yes, then she says no again. Aside from general confusion, didn't that give you some pause to think about whether or not this woman's focus was on the interview, or whether she could knowingly or voluntarily be able, or intelligently be able to respond to the questions?
No, because Detective Previch addressed that and asked her, so do you feel like somebody's coerced you? We answered that. So if it was something towards the end that she didn't understand, she answered one way or the other. We both addressed that. So that was not an issue.
You do recall that she answered in a confused state
Yes.
by giving multiple answers initially, correct? Correct,
and then we asked her another question about her if she understood it, and that was taken care of.
And the interview went on?
Yes, sir.
On at least two occasions that I was able to hear, it sounded like Ms. Schenecker said, "Are my kids coming in later?" She asked you and or Detective Previch, "Are my kids coming in later?" Well, obviously you know that the children are dead at this point, and that question is asked of you twice. Wasn't that an indication to you that there was a disconnect from reality in Ms. Schenecker's mind as she was answering your questions?
No.
You didn't have any feeling that there was a disconnect?
I heard that once. I didn't hear it a second time. It's possible, but no, because I didn't know how she meant, are they coming down? Are we gonna collect them and bring them there forensically? I didn't understand what she meant by that either, but we continued with the interview.
Now, at times, because you're out to try to get some resolution of what happened here, you're trying to get detail, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you're asking for detail, and at times Ms. Schenecker gives you abundant detail, and then at other times she says, "I don't remember a thing." In fact, at one point, even though she's been giving you great detail about what happened with her and her children, at one point when she said, "Well, what happened?" So I think either you or Detective Previch said, "What happened yesterday?" meaning the incident again, going back to that, trying to refocus her on that. She says, "I don't remember. I don't remember yesterday, what happened yesterday." I think you asked her at some point in time also what were her duties in the military. And she gives you great detail in some instances, and in other instances she gives you nothing. Wasn't that ambiguity regarding her memory any concern of yours as you move forward to the interview?
No, sir.
So the interview moved on?
Yes, sir.
What about when she told you, "I love," and she said in relation to Calyx, "I love you, but I've written a suicide note"? Didn't that seem like somebody that might be in need of some kind of medical treatment or mental health treatment that maybe wasn't suitable for that interview at that time?
I would have never stopped an interview because somebody said they wrote a suicide note. The idea of the interview is to have her talk and tell us what she believes happened or what happened. No, I wouldn't have stopped the interview because of that, no.
Now, at some points in time in the recording that we listened to, she seemed to confuse her own two children. She got them backwards as far as what the events were. Now, you had already heard some version of the events, correct?
Yes.
And so as an interviewer of experience would do. You're going back to recover details that maybe you missed the first rendition, or going back to clarify some things. And when you went back, she confused the two children, correct?
Objection to vagueness.
Sustained as to that.
When you were referring to Calyx, she was referring to Bo. When you were referring to Bo, she was referring to Calyx. It's supported in the tape. You know that, correct?
Same objection.
Counsel, you can approach.
If I could have a moment, Judge.
Yes, sir.
We'll go back to that in a second. There were times in the interview in which Ms. Schenecker referred to her children in the present tense. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
Didn't those instances in which she was referring to her children in the present tense as though they were still around and still alive give you pause to consider whether or not she was able to knowingly and intelligently give a statement such as the one
No.
you were taking?
No, sir.
She also referred to committing suicide herself several times, not just once or twice, but she made reference to having thought about that for a long time and having intention to do it even then. Did that give you pause in terms of whether or not Ms. Schenecker had the ability to voluntarily and intelligently give you a statement?
No, sir.
And I think you said earlier that that wouldn't be a reason for you in any regard, correct?
That's correct.
In terms of some of the physical things that were going on, Ms. Schenecker was upset throughout the interview, correct?
There were a few times where her eyes welled up a few times, but as far as crying or out of control crying, never happened.
But she seemed upset throughout the interview, correct?
She was upset through most of the interview, yes.
She appeared to be tired.
Very tired, yes.
In fact, I believe you indicated that she nodded off a couple times where she actually kind of fell asleep and you had to kind of stir her.
Yeah, that's when I went and got her a second cup of coffee, yes, sir.
And you took note of the pauses that she gave in some instances where you would ask a question, there would be a pause before she would make an answer.
Yes.
She also appeared sad, which under the circumstances might be understandable. But
Yes.
you recall that, correct?
Yes.
And you mentioned that her eyes welled up with tears, and so she appeared to be close to crying, if not crying, on a number of occasions during the interview, correct?
A very few times, yes.
In the interview, or during the interview, she was given some coffee to drink. I guess you guys were trying to make her feel comfortable, and she spilled the coffee, correct? Did you remember that?
She spilled it on me, so yes, I remember that.
You have a strong memory of that.
Yes.
And she certainly had slurred
It was just a
speech.
small amount. I mean,
Just
it's
small.
just,
So you weren't,
it was from some of the shaking, it was just a small amount of coffee.
okay. And she had slurred words as we were able to listen to the tape?
On occasion, yes.
And other times she appeared to be clear in her speech?
Extremely.
With all these things that were going on, all the things that I've just brought to your attention that you've acknowledged, did you have any concerns about whether or not her statement was being given knowingly and intelligently?
No, sir.
None whatsoever?
No, sir.
The interview that you had with Ms. Schenecker, it consisted of 3 parts, and at the conclusion of those 3 parts, which we've just been able to listen to, at the conclusion of those 3 parts, she was taken, and eventually she was placed under arrest, and she was then transported to the jail. I think that's where your testimony was?
Yes.
Okay. Judge, may I approach the witness?
But show it to counsel, yes, sir?
I think he's aware of it.
Okay, go ahead.
Detective Sandell, I'm showing you what's been marked for identification purposes as Defense Exhibit 1. I want to ask you to look at it and see if you recognize that.
Yes.
Okay. How do you recognize it, sir?
I viewed it earlier, and
Do
it's,
you have any markings on here?
yes, I initialed it and put today's date on it, yes.
Okay. And when you viewed it earlier, this is not the first time, today wasn't the first time you've ever seen this, correct?
No, sir.
Okay. Is this, and obviously this is a video. Well,
Yes.
I shouldn't say obviously, is it a video?
Yes.
Okay. Does the video accurately represent the events and people that are inside of it?
Yes.
Okay. And you're actually one of them. You were there.
Yes.
So you would know, right? Okay. Judge, I would move the court to accept Defense Exhibit Number 1 into evidence.
May we approach?
Yes. The exhibit is received.
Detective Sandell, tell, if you can, what does this portray? What is it?
It's walking the defendant out to a marked unit where she'll be transported.
Sometimes referred to as a walkout?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I take it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't personally have a hand in the creation of this video.
No.
In fact, I'm not even going to presume that you even were in favor of it, but
No.
what if it exists, correct?
Correct.
Does your department, through the public information section of your agency, have anything to do with how these come about, these walkout videos?
I don't know who does the determination of whether it's done or not or organizes it. I know that something like that may go through the homicide sergeant or whatever sergeant or supervisor that's in charge of the arrest. But as you know, we're told, okay, you're going to take the person down and place them in the unmarked or the marked or the unmarked car for transport. We're not told anything more than that. So as far as walkouts, we never had any control over whether we could or couldn't or any of that. We were just told to do whatever.
Judge, I'd like to ask the court for permission to publish this.
Are you angry with their father?
What's going through your mind?
Yeah, if you didn't capture the beginning.
What happened, Joey? Right here. Get your step.
Are you angry with their father?
What's going through your mind?
Thank you, Mr. Levitz. Detective Sandell, regarding the time frame of this video that we just looked at, this took place after the interview that you've been discussing in your testimony today, correct?
Yes, sir.
In fact, it was the same day?
Yes.
In fact, close in time. It looked like it was broad daylight of whatever day that was. That was right after your interview was conducted?
Probably an hour or two after, because the paperwork needed to be taken care of, the CRA and everything, the charging document needed to be done, so
Okay.
it would have been a little bit after.
And you're not aware of yourself or anyone else in your department or agency having any video that would have been taken between the time of the interview and the time of this video that we just looked at?
No.
So that would be the most recent video that would be in existence, at least as far as you're aware, of our client after the interview that you conducted?
Yes.
Judge, I would ask the court just to give me a moment.
Yes, sir.
Detective Sandell, earlier I asked you I asked you if you were aware, if you remembered an instance in the interview of Ms. Schenecker in which she referred to her kids, and I asked you if that was an indication of her disconnect with reality. I think you answered that it was not, in your opinion. Is that correct?
I think based on the circumstances behind what happened, there were a few things that she said that, were, you couldn't understand in the interview, but as far as answers she gave, very precise answers. She knew where they were at in the house. She knew where she shot him. I mean, she answered questions very lucid.
Well, you certainly don't take the position that her asking you if her kids are coming in later after she shot them is a realistic statement, do you?
No.
Okay.
But that would not cause me to not continue the interview.
I understand. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Redirect, counsel.
Yes, sir.
Did you or anyone else have to give Ms. Schenecker any assistance to walk from the holding cell to the conference room?
No.
Was she banging against the walls or stumbling in any fashion when she walked that distance?
No, sir.
You indicated that their sex crimes division in the Tampa Police Department could do forensic interviews on videotape, but that was not unknown to you at the time. Is that right?
I knew that they did forensic interviews down there of children, but it was never made available to me or to our squad that we could do interviews down there.
And that was my question, is I wanted you to explain to them what forensic interview was.
A specialist that would come in specifically for a child, when you're interviewing a child 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. There's techniques that they use when they do interviews for kids that age, young children that can't express themselves like we can. And that's, when I say forensic interview, that's what I'm talking about, and it's usually involving a sex crime of some type.
And in fact, those procedures established for forensics interviews of children or by law for children under a certain age, is that right?
Yes.
Is there any such law you know of that requires such videotaping of other interviews of suspects for any crimes?
No, sir.
You have been with Tampa Police Department homicide for how long?
7 years.
And prior to that, how long in law enforcement total?
Total 20 years in law enforcement, and like I said, 6 years at the sheriff's office prior to that.
In all of that time, in homicide cases, in any type of criminal investigation, have you ever known, participated in, or even heard rank hearsay about a suspect being videotaped for the entire time from the point of first contact until interview?
No.
At any time on January 28th, did Ms. Schenecker, in any terminology, describe or complain to you that she was in any physical discomfort or distress?
No.
Did she, well, let me ask you this. There were questions asked of you about whether you obtained her medical records or her mental health records prior to the interview. You referenced HIPAA. Is that a federal law as you understand it?
Yes.
And as your understanding of it is, what impact does that have upon you as an investigator to obtain an individual, whether they be suspect or witness, an individual's medical records?
It would require a court order or a search warrant, which would take hours more than likely to do, and then you would probably not ever be able to interview. But you'd need certain things to be able to obtain that information, and we don't have that capability.
During the interview, did you and Detective Previch ask her about her medications?
Yes.
During the interview, did you ask her about whether she had bipolar disease?
Yes.
during the interview, did you ask her about whether she had been regularly taking her medications?
Yes, and she said she had.
During this interview, were you making any attempts to conceal the possibility that Ms. Schenecker may be mentally ill?
No.
Counsel asked you questions about her statement, should I get a lawyer? I would like to ask you about your understanding of your obligation as a law enforcement officer prior to an in-custody interview. Are you required to advise a suspect of their rights to an attorney?
Yes.
Are you required, as you understand it, to give that suspect legal advice as to whether they should have an attorney or not, whether they should exercise their right to counsel?
No, sir.
Is that a decision, as you understand it, that is the suspects and the suspects alone to exercise?
Yes.
During the video you just saw, at the beginning, or as Ms. Schenecker is led out near the street, didn't she say which car?
Yes.
In your mind, did that indicate to you that she had an awareness of her surroundings?
Yes.
On the video you saw, did you see evidence of her shaking, her tremors in her hands and her head?
The tardive dyskinesia, yes, sir.
And is that what she advised you about on the tape during the interview?
Yes.
And as she explained it during the interview, it was a side effect of some medication she was taking?
I believe she said Abilify, and there was some other medication she was taking to try to correct it as well.
Now, this walkout video that was taken sometime after the interview that you conducted, is that correct?
Yes.
Was she immediately whisked away from the interview room to the nearby police car, or was there some delay?
No, it was delayed because I had to type up the charging document, the CRA, for her to be able to be booked into the jail.
Okay.
So it would have probably been an hour or more.
Okay. And you had well over an hour and a half of interviews, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Your start time, as noted on the interview, was 11:37.
Yes.
So an hour and a half from there would be about approximately 1 o'clock. You indicated it took another hour for you to type up the charging document,
Yes.
at least before she's taken out.
Correct.
So that would it be correct? It would be at least 2 p.m. before
Yes.
she was let outside.
Yes, sir.
In the interview, did Ms. Schenecker indicate that she was taking bow to practice at 7 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay. And that's when she shot and killed her son, Bo Schenecker?
Yes. On en route to the practice.
The previous
Yes.
day.
Yes.
So if my math is, well, I'll allow you to do the math. How many hours passed between the shooting of Bo Schenecker at 7 p.m. and that walkout video at least at 2 p.m. the next day?
18 hours, approximately.
The video, the way she appeared on the video, was that how she appeared even at the beginning of the interview?
Yeah, mostly. I mean, she didn't shake the entire time, but yes.
All right. Do you know whether that's how she appeared at the scene?
They had advised me that she did shake a small amount before they transported her, but they weren't specific like the entire time or anything, because like I said, they, or even in their interview, that they had sat her on a couch at one time.
Okay.
While she was waiting.
Now, are you aware of any statements that the defendant made to Officer Arnold during the transport to the jail?
No, I didn't.
I want to object.
Allow me to, Fred?
Did Ms. Schenecker indicate to you during the interview that she took medication for that shaking tardive dyskinesia?
Yes.
Do you have any indication or understanding of how long it had been since she took that medication that would have controlled the shaking that you saw on the video after 2 p.m., some 18 hours after she killed her son?
No.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
May this witness be excused?
I'd ask to be subject to recall.
Sir, you may step down, however, you're subject to recall. You have to leave a number when it's called upon. You'll be back here in short order, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ralph Monaco.
You swear that the testimony you will give is true, and the truth,
I do.
so please right over here. This way, please.
Any questions?
Good afternoon, sir.
How you doing?
Would you state your name, sir, and spell your last name?
Ralph Monaco, Monaco.
And how old are you, sir?
68 years old.
Are you employed?
1 day a week. I'm retired.
What are you retired from? What line of work?
Barber.
All right, sir. And what do you do 1 day a week?
Cut hair.
Okay, sir. Have you had an interest in firearms through the course of your life?
I moved to Florida in 1981, and my interest was in handguns. And prior to that, in New York, I got an NRA certificate at the age of, I think it was 14.
Okay, and have you taken gun safety courses in Florida?
Yes, I took in 1988, Pasco Hernando County College. Had a course that I have a college credit on.
Okay, sir.
Safety, it was a safety course.
All right. Given your interest in firearms, did you become associated in any fashion with a gun store called Lock and Load on Tampa Road in Oldsmar?
Yes, a friend of mine owns that store.
And what's that person's name?
Jerry Tanza.
Okay. And as a result of your friendship and your association with that store, back in January of 2011, did you help out Mr. Tanzo in any fashion at that business?
Yes, I did. I had a shoulder operation previous to that, and I used to go down to the store and help him with the store.
Okay. Would you help him with customers?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Would you discuss firearms with customers that customers may want to select for purchase?
Definitely I did.
And were you there on Saturday, January 22nd of 2011?
Yeah.
When an individual representing herself as Julie Schenecker came in the store?
Yes. Yes.
Do you see that individual in courtroom today?
Yes.
And could you identify what she is wearing?
A gray suit, glasses.
Okay, thank you, sir. Did Ms. Schenecker enter the store while you were assisting Mr. Tanzo?
Yes, I was at the counter.
And did you assist her and show her some firearms?
I greeted her. We have a policy of saying, welcome to Lock and Load, and can I help you? And she came over to the counter and said that she wanted to buy a firearm.
Did she tell you why she wanted to buy a firearm?
Yes, she did, because there was break-ins in her neighborhood.
Okay. In January of 2011, did Lock and Load have video recording inside of the business?
Yes, they did.
And was that activated, to your knowledge, on January 22nd?
Yes, it was.
At the time Ms. Schenecker was in the store?
Yes, it was.
And have you seen videos of that, your encounter with Ms. Schenecker on January 22nd, 2011?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Let me show you 3 videos marked States Exhibits 89, 90, 91.
These are the sunglasses, the prescription.
Go ahead if you need those, sir.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir. This is 89, 90, and 91.
Yes.
From markings on those videos, do you recognize those videos as ones that you viewed within the last couple of weeks?
Yes, they are. I have them initialed.
Okay, sir. And from having viewed each of those 3 video recordings, did you recognize them as a fair and accurate representation video of your contact with Ms. Schenecker inside Lock and Load on that Saturday of January 22nd, 2011, when she came to inquire about guns?
Yes.
Your Honor, New States Exhibits 89, 90, and 91 in evidence.
No objection, Judge.
Proceed without objection.
May I publish States 89?
You may.
If you need to use your glasses to see the screen, just let us know, sir.
Okay,
Go ahead and feel free to put them
I'll
on.
wait until I see how big it is.
And if the witness needs to and communicates such, may he step down.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
James, turn the audio.
There's no audio. Remember, you had to play it on this screen, didn't you?
If I really good, are you okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Is that you behind the counter, Mr. Monaco?
Yes, it is.
Is it playing? And what are you showing her? Do you recall?
I had asked her if she wanted a revolver or an automatic, and she said a revolver, and I pulled it out of the showcase, checked it, and handed it to her, which is normal procedure.
Unloaded, of course.
Of course.
And is she talking to you as she holds the gun?
She's possibly asking me questions. It looks like she's holding it in her hand to see what it feels like. That's what generally people do, to feel the grip and stuff like that.
Who's the fellow in the orange?
That's
just walked
Jerry.
behind the counter?
That's Jerry, the owner of the shop.
Mr. Tanzo?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you showing her a different gun?
I don't know if I pulled a different one out of the case. I do not think so. I think she took the original gun that I handed her. I knew it had a laser on it, and I had one without a laser, and I asked her if she wanted that, and she said no.
Did you discuss with her what a laser did?
Yes,
What did you tell her?
that where the laser points is where the bullet's going to hit.
Do you see what you're doing now?
Yes. Okay. I might have pulled out another to show her the difference.
Are you handing a gun to her just a few seconds ago? Now, for the written record, Mr. Monaco, how far away from you is she standing?
The width of the case, that's what, I think 2 feet or something like that.
Okay. And what is the piece of paper that you're getting and placing on the counter now?
That's the form that you have to fill out that the ATF gets. She had decided to buy the gun, and when they say they're committed to it, I get the form and I give it to them, and they have to fill it out.
Is she putting on glasses now?
Yes, she is.
And what is she doing as we see her?
She's, looks like she's reading the questions and filling them in.
And the form she's filling, is that called a firearms transaction record?
I don't know what the official, I don't do any of the paperwork at the store, so I don't know. I know it's an ATF official form.
Would you recognize it if you saw it again?
Yes, I would.
And what is Ms. Schenecker doing now?
It looks like she's still filling out the form. It's a number of questions.
Is there any type of identifications that is required to be presented by the purchaser?
Yes, we ask if they have a Florida driver's license before they can buy a gun. We ask them if they have a carry conceal permit, and if they do, I take it, I bring it in the back room, I make a copy of both of them on one piece of paper, and I write a telephone number on it. Then if there's any problem, we know how to get in touch with them.
Is that concluded or just frozen? Let's see, what's the time on that?
6:28, 6:21. It's still going.
Pardon me?
It's going down here, but it's the deal. This is frozen. It's spinning. You can take it out, bring it back in, and then
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes. You're going to need a few moments for that, counsel.
Yes, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you that next 15-minute or so conference break. I'll remind you of my prior admonitions with regards to our instructions and just go ahead and send you out for 15 minutes. You may step out.
All right.
Okay, our jury's exited the courtroom. Mr. Monica, if you wish to step down for a break, you can too. However, I'm going to go ahead and instruct you not to discuss the case or your testimony with anyone until you return to the stand, okay?
Could I go outside or just stay in the courtroom?
You can step out if you...
I'll go by my wife. I'll look